Okay, well, thank you for the invitation to present some of the work that we're doing that was part of the Energy Frontier Research Center that DOE funded the previous 5 years. The EFRC was not renewed, so you're hearing a lot of the last of the works coming out right now. So there we go. I was seeing it here, I wasn't seeing it up there. So, but as Dan pointed out, this is a multi-institutional endeavor, and I'll try to give credit to everybody who did work on this portion of the project here in a few minutes. As I probably do not need to point out to this group, okay, renewables are going to be an important aspect in the energy forecast for the future. Renewables right now represent somewhere around 10-11% of the total energy use in the world right now, and by 2040 they're expected to rise to somewhere around a quarter of the total energy use in there. A lot of that will be wind and solar, but much of that will be biomass. Okay, which there's a lot of interest in converting that biomass to both chemicals and to fuels. Okay, and by fuels we mean something besides just putting wood chips into our internal combustion engine, which doesn't seem to work very well. So, these bioprocessing is biomaterials. Creates a lot of challenges for catalysts in the 21st century. It's not the same as treating resids or other things that we have done in the past for creating fuels from that. Okay, one of the big things is selectivity. Okay, in the past, we've mostly been interested in the catalyst activity of materials, as long as we made some kind of gasoline and distillate from that. But nowadays, we want to keep the atom efficiency as high as possible. Okay, the primary reason there is about 50% of the energy cost of processing nowadays has to do with the separations. So if we can make one type of feed go to one type of product, we can cut down significantly on the amount of capital involved in that. Another thing is stability of the catalyst. Again, many of these catalysts were developed for the oil industry, okay, in which water is significantly excluded from the feedstock. Water in either a steam form or a liquid form is extremely corrosive to catalysts and gives rise to severe deactivation. Well, one of the things we found early on in our EFRC was that we were concentrating on making nanoparticles, and we found quickly that nanoparticles are easy to make, they're hard to keep around. Okay, liquid, high-temperature water will abrade those materials and turn those into basically mush. We'd like to control, along with that, we would like to control the particle size and morphology, and actually once we control those particles, we want to keep those particles around in these conditions, and we want to control the interactions between the metal and the support. The support we consider to be just another ligand, okay, with this thing, and can we, by changing the nature of that ligand, change the selectivity and stability of the catalyst there. So, want to introduce a synthetic tool that we've been using in our groups for a number of years now. This is called atomic layer deposition. Atomic layer deposition is primarily just a specialized form of chemical vapor deposition, but in atomic layer deposition we decouple the deposition and the decomposition step from each other to get greater control on the surface of the catalyst. When you start with a hydroxylated surface, such as silica, alumina, you start off with large quantities of hydroxyl groups on the surface of the catalyst, depending on the conditions you treat those on. If we then add to that a gas phase alkyl metal material, such as the aluminum alkyl you see here, those will interact with the surface hydroxyls, releasing one of the alkyl groups and leaving the rest on the surface of the catalyst. Okay. Eventually, we're going to do one of two things. We're either going to saturate the material, which most of the cartoons you see for this show this kind of saturations. We find for the most part we don't get that, okay, because the ligands that are left over are taking up so much space, we don't completely saturate. So once we do that, no matter how much of the metal alkyl we add to this, we end up with still only less than a monolayer of the material going on there. After that, we stop feeding it in the alkyl group and start doing a decomposition step. In the case of TMA, what we do is feed it in water. That then releases the rest of the alkyl groups, in this case is methane, and generates new hydroxyl groups on the surface. Okay, and that then allows us to go through the whole series again, doing another layer, and so we can build up layer by layer onto the surface of the catalyst, whatever we're interested in. We can change those materials partway through the synthesis to get mixed phases and a whole raft of other things we can do. In the case of the alumina, we grow about an angstrom at a time onto there. So for making something like 10 angstrom onto the surface of there, we take at least 10 cycles of aluminum through there. And you'll see the use of the word cycles throughout the talk I'm giving today. That basically is this entire cycle that you see going on here. So. The other nice thing about ALD is not a line-of-sight process. Okay, here you see some very deep wells. Okay, in which this is zinc oxide that is going down onto the surface of the catalyst. And you can see in the upper portion that actually even the little dimples that show up in there, we do line. So there are no pores that are going to be non-accessible to this. So we can really probe into the pores of things like zeolites, deep into large particles, etc. So it coats everything. Within the Energy Frontier Research Center, we had a lot of interest for ALD. We were using it, for example, to make isolated metals on the surface of the catalysts, and we've presented some papers on that. We're very interested in making both bimetallics and alloy materials. Alloys are relatively easy to make. Okay, bimetallic core shell materials are sometimes more difficult. And we've been able to develop techniques in which we can change which is the core and which is the shell for those materials. And it makes a whole lot of difference which is on the inside and which is on the outside, as we've seen from papers here this week here. We can also control the nature of the support, okay, by putting down other layers on top of that. Either layers that completely cover the blue that you see here, or layers that interact very carefully with that. So we can introduce specific acidity or sites and things like that there. We're also did some work on what we call nanobowls. Okay, everything now needs to be nano, and by nano we're not just talking about the budgets that DOE is putting out here. So, but nanobowls were an idea in which we were able to control the pillars around the metals, and therefore control the access to those. But what I'm going to talk about this morning in the talk is what we call overcoating of these materials, in which we've actually put various components such as aluminum oxide over the top of the metals, okay, to form new pores on there and control the interaction with the surface of the catalyst. The overcoating is basically the next step beyond what I just talked about. You can see in the first portion there we can make palladium particles, for example, on the surface of aluminum, overcoat those with aluminum, but when we then calcine those materials, we actually form new pores into the catalyst. Okay, and those can lead to some improvements or changes, at least, in the selectivity of the catalyst of those materials. One of the reactions we're interested in for biomass processing, which has been highlighted in many talks here this week, is the reaction of furfural to furfural alcohol, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump to levulinic acid, okay, which is an important intermediate for fuels formation there. We can form furfural, we can react furfural to various components, such as furfural alcohol, which is our preferred product shown in the left here, and or if we concentrate on more palladium catalyst, we'll decarbonylate that material to go to furan as the product. We're very interested in improving the selectivity to the furfural alcohol in this material here. So. For those of you who saw our paper yesterday, okay, I won't repeat all the results here, but we've been able to use ALD overcoating, improve the change the selectivity for the palladium hydrogenation of the furfural alcohol. If we use palladium by itself, which has a lot of edge and corner sites on there, we form a lot of the alcohol without cleaving that carbonyl bond. Okay, by putting in the ALD overcoating, that ALD overcoating for alumina in this case goes specifically primarily to edge and corner sites, leaving Keras sites open and giving rise to higher concentrations of the furan products that you see on the right there. So. The catalyst I'm going to be talking about here in this morning's talk is a copper chromite catalyst. It's a commercial catalyst. Comes from BASF. The concentrations are shown here, relatively low surface areas, and it's quite selective for the reaction of furfural to furfural alcohol from there. So. The reactivity for the catalyst as received is shown here, okay, and the important thing to point out is the severe deactivation with just a small amount of time on stream that we see here. We've investigated this extensively in the past, okay, and it's shown that the deactivation is due to two components that are going on the catalyst. First of all, we see that some of the chromium doesn't stay put where it is. It tends to creep over the catalyst, and we see actually the formation of a lot of copper chromite on the external surface area, not touching the chromium oxide. In addition, the little squiggles you see here are carbon deposits that build up on this catalyst over a long period of time. So the goal of this group in IAC was to find other ways of stabilizing these particles to decrease the amount of deactivation on there. As I said, what we've discovered is that ALD overcoating can help a lot in both the selectivity and the stability of these catalysts. We actually kind of stumbled across this. I'll be honest with you that we were looking to see when, as we put aluminum over the top of metals, when would we lose communication with that metal? And we found that out published on that. But what we didn't expect is that if we calcine these materials at high temperatures, we would generate these new pores down to the surface of the catalyst, which would still remain the metal to be active. Peter Stair was the one who first discovered this, okay, and they found out that not only was the catalyst more selective for oxidative dehydrogenation of things like propane, okay, getting, ethane to ethylene instead of CO2, the catalyst also was very resistant to sintering and coking on that material. As an example, the catalyst A there, which is just a bare palladium catalyst, actually plugged up the reactor in about less than 15 minutes at 675 degrees C. The catalyst kept right on going when we did the overcoating of these materials for that. And as you can see from the bar in the far lower left-hand corner there, the catalyst without the overcoating under used conditions is severely sintered, and we get a lot larger particles of palladium on the surface of the catalyst. So basically, we are using this overcoating for both catalyst selectivity and deactivation and a number of other things that you see listed on that chart right there. Everybody needs to show some pictures of their kids whenever they get onto a plane. So these are our kids here. Here's just 0 cycles of alumina on the palladium on the alumina. You can see the individual particles right here. Okay, as we start adding 5 cycles of alumina, you can start to see the formation of the alumina overcoat going over the top of the palladium particle, not changing the size of that. Okay, and as we increase that, we just increase the thickness of that layer, and what we find is there is a linear increase in the aluminum overcoating as we go through additional ALD cycles of this material. We're not limited just to alumina for these materials. Here you see some pictures of alumina going over zirconia oxide materials. Okay, and you can see in the lower right-hand corner the zirconia material in the center, and this is aluminum on the outside. Okay, and again, as we treat these materials in steam or high-temperature liquid water, we retain the size of the metal nanoparticles that we've worked so hard to attain. Here's titania going over zirconium oxide. Some more pictures again, and again you can see the zirconium oxide in the middle, and the thin layer of titania going on outside. There's 4 nanometers of TiO2 on there. So we can control the amount of materials going on there by just the number of cycles that we put in there and the way that we treat those materials. So we went in and started looking at ways to improve the selectivity and stability of the copper catalyst. Here, I'll draw your attention to the upper portion of this, the open circles here. Okay, the blue line there with the I guess those are squares there, is the catalyst without any overcoating. When we first put it in a reactor, this was work that was originally done at University of Wisconsin, one of our partners in the EFRC program there, and they saw the deactivation that you see going on in the top portion here. When it got to a certain time on stream, the material was regenerated and generated a new curve, which you see in the red here. Okay, you can see that we do gain most of the activity back, but it has dropped down considerably in activity. Whoops. And finally, if we get some additional buttons here to touch. So the red then can be regenerated again, generating the green curve, okay, which is again, we've regenerated the catalyst activity, but it's lower than the original initial activity. And this is due to, again, the sintering and the movement of material over the top of the catalyst. When we do 20 cycles of alumina ALD overcoating, okay, you can see there are 3 different colors of symbols in there, and every time we regenerate the catalyst, we go back to the same component there. So, but the important thing is in addition to this, even though we can keep the stability of the metal particle here, the lower overall activity of this material is lower than the material that we see up above here. So the stability of the metal particle is increased dramatically here, okay, but there is a loss in general activity for this catalyst. Okay, and I can tell you that that is due to the strong interaction of the alumina phase with the copper to form a copper aluminate phase, which is less active than the copper by itself here. And that's what I'm saying here. So when we put aluminum over the top of the copper, we form this copper aluminate phase, okay, which is less active than the copper by itself. What I'm going to be showing you here is we can replace the alumina overcoating with titania, okay, and copper does not form as a strong titanate onto the surface here, which basically it can form that cage over the material, okay, without